Everyone says AI can generate impressive 3D models in just a few seconds. But when it comes to real projects, the real question is which platform actually gives you the best overall workflow? I've heard Tripo is often called one of the best AI 3D model generation platforms. So let's take a closer look. Tripo is trusted by over 6.5 million creators worldwide, supported by a community of more than 40,000 active developers, serving over 700 industry clients, and powering the creation of more than 100 million 3D models. With two production-oriented generation systems, H3.1 for high-detail assets and Smart Mesh for production-ready lightweight meshes, Tripo helps creators generate the right model for the right workflow. From there, you can continue editing, refining, segmenting, retopologizing, rigging, animating, and exporting your assets, all within the same production pipeline. So, how does it compare with other platforms? Let's find out by comparing Tripo with Hyper3D, Meshy. Alright, let's kick things off with our first comparison, Tripo versus Hyper3D. Now, if you've been searching for an AI tool to create 3D models, you've probably heard of both of these. They both promise fast, high-quality 3D generation, but the real question is, which one actually gives you the better result? So instead of looking at the marketing, let's compare them side by side. First up is image to 3D. I've got both results on the screen right now. And honestly, at first glance, they look pretty similar. But once you start looking a little closer, the differences become much easier to notice. The Tripo model keeps more of the original shape and the smaller details from the image. It looks cleaner overall, especially around the edges. The Hyper3D result is still good, but in a few areas it looks a bit rougher and would likely need a little more cleanup before using it in a project. Now, that's not a huge difference if you're just experimenting, but if you're creating assets for games, animation, or product design, starting with a cleaner model can save you a lot of time later. So for this category, I'd give the point to Tripo. Next, let's talk about mesh quality. This isn't the most exciting feature to talk about, but if you've ever edited a 3D model, you'll know why it matters. A cleaner mesh means fewer fixes, less frustration, and a much smoother workflow. Looking at these two models, Tripo gives a cleaner starting point, while the Hyper3D mesh would likely need a bit more work before moving into software like Blender, Unity, or Unreal Engine. Again, Hyper3D does a decent job, but if I had to choose one to continue working with, I'd still go with Tripo, because it gets me closer to a finished model. So that's another point for Tripo. Now let's move on to the overall model quality. This is where I started noticing a bigger difference. When you compare both models side by side, Tripo holds on to more of the finer details. Small shapes, curves, and edges look more natural, which makes the final model feel more polished. Hyper3D still creates a solid result, but if you're aiming for the best-looking model with the least amount of extra work, I'd lean towards Tripo here. Now, before we decide on a winner, there's one more thing we need to look at: the pricing. And honestly, this part surprised me. Both platforms offer a free plan, which is great if you're just getting started. But once you move to the paid plans, the difference becomes much more noticeable. Tripo's Pro plan starts at $19.90 per month and gives you up to 120 assets. Hyper3D's Creator plan starts at $30 per month but includes 60 assets. So you're paying around $10 more while getting only half the number of assets. If you're creating 3D models regularly, that's a pretty big difference. The gap gets even bigger with the higher plans. Tripo's Max plan costs $89.90 a month and supports up to 1,000 assets. On the other hand, Hyper3D's business plan costs $120 a month and supports up to 416 assets. So if you're looking at overall value for money, Tripo definitely comes out ahead. Alright, let's put everything together. Image to 3D goes to Tripo, mesh quality goes to Tripo. Overall, model quality goes to Tripo. Pricing and value also goes to Tripo. That brings us to the final score. Tripo, 4. Hyper3D, 0. Here's the final scorecard. Now, a 4-0 score doesn't mean Hyper3D is a bad tool. It can still generate some really impressive 3D models, and for many creators, it could be more than enough. But based on everything we compared today, Tripo gives cleaner results, better value for money, and a smoother overall experience. So for this first matchup, Tripo takes the win. But that's just the beginning. Next up, let's see how Tripo performs against another popular AI 3D generator, Meshy. Honestly, this is the matchup I was looking forward to the most. Tripo versus Meshy. If you've ever searched for AI 3D generators, you've probably come across Meshy. It's one of the biggest names in this space, so I was genuinely curious to see how it stacks up against Tripo. And I'll be honest, compared to the Hyper 3D comparison, this one was much closer. Meshy actually put up a really good fight, so let's see where each platform shines. Now, instead of starting with features, let's begin with the most important thing, the final model. Because at the end of the day, nobody really cares how many features a tool has if the final result doesn't look good. Looking at both models side by side, Tripo consistently produces cleaner geometry and stronger overall structure, especially when the models become more detailed. Meshy also generates really impressive models, and for simpler objects, the difference honestly isn't that big. In fact, if you're just creating quick concepts or basic assets, Meshy does a great job. But once the models become more complex, Tripo preserves those finer details much better. So for overall model quality, I'd give this point to Tripo. Now let's move on to texture quality. Wow, this was actually easier to notice than I expected. According to the comparison, Tripo delivers higher quality texture workflows with much stronger detail restoration. Meshy also creates good textures, and I definitely wouldn't call them bad. But when you zoom in, Tripo simply looks a little cleaner and more polished. If you're creating assets for games, animation, or professional projects, those extra details really matter. So this point also goes to Tripo. Now here's the category that surprised me the most, the workflow. Creating the model is only the first step. The real question is, how easy is it to continue working with that model afterwards? This is where Tripo's Smart Mesh feature really stands out. It automatically generates clean, production-ready topology in just a few seconds, making it much easier to continue editing inside Blender, Maya, Unity, or Unreal Engine. That means less manual cleanup and a much smoother workflow. If you're building lots of assets every week, that's a huge time saver. So I'd give another point to Tripo, but I also want to give Meshy some credit here. One thing I genuinely like about Meshy is how simple it feels. If you're completely new to AI 3D generation and just want to create a model quickly, without learning advanced production workflows, Meshy is a really beginner-friendly platform. Sometimes keeping things simple is actually a big advantage. So for ease of use and beginner friendliness, I'll happily give this point to Meshy. Alright, now let's talk about generation speed. This was another category that caught my attention. Both platforms are capable of generating models pretty quickly, but according to this comparison, Tripo is optimized for much faster production workflows and rapid iteration. Meshy is still fast enough for most users, but some workflows can take a little longer depending on the complexity of the model. Now, if you're only creating 1 or 2 models, that probably won't matter much. But if you're generating dozens of assets every day, those extra minutes really start adding up. So this point goes to Tripo. Now here's something interesting, the plugin ecosystem. Honestly, I expected one platform to clearly have the advantage here. But after looking at the comparison, both platforms actually offer a really solid ecosystem. Whether you're working inside Blender, Maya, Unity, Unreal Engine, or other popular 3D software, both tools fit nicely into existing workflows. So instead of forcing a winner, I'm calling this one a draw. Now let's move on to pricing. Both platforms offer a free plan, which is great because anyone can try them before spending any money. Tripo starts at $19.90 per month and includes up to 120 assets. Meshy starts at $20 per month and includes up to 100 assets. So the monthly pricing is almost identical, but Tripo gives you slightly more value right from the beginning. The difference becomes even more noticeable if you're creating lots of models. Tripo also offers a max plan with support for up to 1,000 assets, making it a much stronger option for high-volume creators. One thing I found really interesting was the cost per model. Tripo comes in at around 17 cents per model. Meshy is around 20 cents per model. Now, 3 cents doesn't sound like much, but over hundreds or even thousands of generations, those savings can really add up. So when it comes to overall value for money, I'd lean towards Tripo. All right, let's put everything together. Overall model quality, Tripo. Texture quality, Tripo. Smart mesh and production workflow, Tripo. Generation speed, Tripo. Ease of use for beginners, Meshy. That wraps up our comparison of Tripo, Hyper3D, and Meshy. As we've seen, each platform has its own strengths, but the right choice ultimately depends on your workflow and the types of projects you're working on. To explore Tripo further, check out the link in the description below. New users can get 500 free credits using my code. Plus, you can get 60% off your first month with the discount code TRIPACREW. So definitely check out Tripo using the link in the description below and take advantage of those offers. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.